I'm going to be showing 4 projects that have taken place in public space. I specialize in large-scale interactive installations that transform the cities. And the most important sort of idea that I work with is this concept of Churchill, who once said, "We make buildings and buildings make us." But globalization suggests that the situation is no longer the case. Today, homogeneity is what we see. A building in LA, Singapore, or Mexico is bound not to represent citizenry, but it represents capital. Is how quickly, how inexpensively developers, architects, and urbanists and so on can actually develop a solution to house people. So I think that one of the interesting things about artists is they can interrupt these narratives of homogeneity, and I'll show you how I've done that for the past little while. Show you 2 examples from the past and and 2 examples from the recent. This is the Zocalo Square in Mexico City. I was commissioned to do a project to celebrate the arrival of the year 2000. And instead of spending $54 million like the Egyptians did for Jean-Michel Jarre's transformation of the pyramids of Egypt, a VIP show that only 4,000 people enjoyed, what we did is we set up a website where people could actually direct and point searchlights in the night sky in the historic center of Mexico City. So what you're seeing here is a website where you could select individual lights, point them in any direction, creating meshes or pyramids or any kind of light structure. And then once you were happy with your design, you would send it to Mexico City with your name, your dedication, perhaps your location. And then this would be queued up, and every 8 seconds, a new design arriving from the internet would be rendered in the night sky of the Zocalo. So we're seeing here at 3 a.m. on the 28th of December. The piece worked from 1 week before and 1 week after the millennium. Every night from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., the designs would be rendered in the night sky. And it was really useful. In Mexico, we have beautiful pollution, which works as a kind of natural hazer that really highlights the light beams. But some of the important things for me was that it wasn't a show. It didn't have a beginning or an end. It didn't have a didactic, pedagogical kind of approach. It didn't have a proscenium with a privileged viewpoint for VIPs. It was really just activating the entire sort of area around the Zocalo Square. It could be seen from a 10-mile radius. Here we have at 4th of January at 8 p.m., just people promenading and walking around the Zocalo Square, minding their own business, but sometimes stopping and looking at the sky and seeing these big shapes move. And you notice that every time that these searchlights move to make one of the designs coming from the internet, they stop for a brief second. And what we would do is we would photograph the design from 3 or 4 webcams and then build a web page for each and every participant and send them an email saying, here is your web page, to show that the participation did really take place. So it's kind of like a takeover of public space. So you see there's an image, would photograph it, and then make your web page. And here are some examples of web pages. On the left, you have the virtual view of what you did from a distance. You could have been in any country or any region of Mexico. And on the right, actual photographs from the very, very same vantage point. And this was very important in 1999 because Mexicans, we have been voting against PRI for 80 years and nothing had happened. So it was important to let people know that participation was a vehicle for transformation, that what they were doing was really taking over all of the lighting scheme in the Zocalo Square. We got 800,000 participants from 89 countries, with 70% of the traffic from Mexico itself. And the comments on the top of the webpage were completely uncensored, which was a really important sort of element of this project. Most of the comments were things like, I dedicate this to Margarita, I hope you get better, you're at the hospital. But we also had marriage proposals, we had soccer scores, we had poetry, a lot of Zapatista slogans. In 1999, the Zapatista rebellion was actually quite active electronically. So the public site of the virtual was sort of overlaid with the real side of the Zocalo.
Muy bonitas. La verdad que sí, está bonita. Un espectáculo muy bonito. Padrísimas.
Son muy potentes.
Hermosas. Me dijo mi mamá que esas luces las puede manejar uno que tenga ¿qué? acá? Internet. Ah, sí, vamos a verlas.
No, más que nada son sistemas computarizados manejados de luces, pero no interviene nada de internet.
Sí,
son sistemas.
esto sí.
Interviene
¿Esto sí es
porque
internet?
Sí.
de cada parte de la República hicieron sus diseños para que aquí juntaran las luces y se vieran
Entrevista a él.
5 minutos. Los diseños y pasan el nombre y la dirección del chavo que los hizo.
Y ahora que venimos al Zócalo, vemos las luces y ahora decimos, ahora estamos en un Hollywood, pero mexicano.
Sí, muy bonito, que es una obra de arte.
Uno mismo manda su diseño.
El mejor es el que hace así el techo.
Le preguntaba que si tenían algún significado cruzados y todo eso, por la cuestión de las constelaciones.
De hecho, nos parece una toma. So through word of mouth, but also through media coverage, people would find out that if those lights were moving is because somebody somewhere in the planet was actually activating it. Because I make mostly interactive artwork in public space, it's kind of a humbling experience because if no one participates, the artwork actually does not exist. The lights just turn themselves off and there's nothing to see. So one of the things that I'm really interested in is in the generation of agency, the sense of public takeover of public space, of self-representation. Here is the same project, except I took it to, this is in the Place Bellecour in Lyon, and it's the same lights, except that shot with a better camera, so it gives you an idea of the kind of scale of it. And what I'm really interested in is in people promenading in public space other than shopping. So just walking in space and sharing space in something that does not necessarily tell you a story. We did a version of this project for the Vancouver Olympics, and we updated, like in 1999 we had used Java, and now we're using Google Earth, which as you know already has a lot of sort of rendered architecture. So you would make your design in Vancouver over English Bay and navigate it with Google Earth. And then you would send it to Vancouver. And one more time, we got 800,000 participants. Because of the Olympics, though, we got it from 164 countries. So it's very interesting how the internet can actually disintermediate the art experience and allow people from different time zones to participate. This is just a time-lapse video of what it looked like in Vancouver with the designs. Another of the projects that I've done that has been quite successful and has toured extensively is a shadow play that is inspired by the work of Samuel van Hoogstraat, and a disciple of Rembrandt, who worked in Rotterdam and who, like Rembrandt, used shadow plays to represent perspective. And so this project, Body Movies, is actually a very large-scale shadow play where we took photographs of people from the city where it's projected, first in Rotterdam, and we project them with the world's brightest projectors. These portraits are 60 foot high. Is that 25 meters high? Well, whatever, almost 60 foot high. And then the portraits of the people are on the wall, but there's very, very powerful light sources on the floor. So it washes off the portraits. And then as people walk through the Schouwburg Square in Rotterdam, they block the bottom light and cast their shadow onto the facade of the building. And then as you walk close to or far away from the facade, your shadow grows from 6 feet all the way to 60 feet. And one of the interesting things about this project is that without instructions, without anyone telling you what to do or not to do, people would sort of start getting together or sort of overlapping with the portraits, and in a process I call reverse puppetry. They would sort of grow and put themselves and animate these portraits and create this ad hoc narratives of representation. And some of the stuff that we ended up seeing in this project was really quite surprising. We saw a man on a wheelchair project himself 60 foot high and crush everybody under his wheels and derive a lot of pleasure from this. Depending on the day of the week, we'd get very different kinds of responses. In the weekends, there was lots of kids, of course, in the square. Tuesdays was methadone night at the nearby church, so you'd get all the drug addicts. You'd get break dancers, just basically a whole bunch of different people who would sort of see themselves projected onto the space and then just take over the platform and self-represent or represent others. And contrary to like the work that I just showed you with the internet, the shadow is a very intuitive interface. We all sort of have a very sophisticated language of what we can do with the shadow, and most cultures have a sophisticated tradition of shadow puppetry or theater. Technologically, it did have a camera that is using computer vision, kind of like what you use here for Homeland Security, to detect the presence of people. And more importantly, that when a portrait and a shadow would overlap, automatically the system would send a small sound, feedback sound in public space, tick, just to let you know that you had seen that portrait already. And more importantly, once all of the portraits in a given scene were revealed, automatically the system would black out and cue in a new image, in a way frustrating representation, because the idea is this is not a project about portraits, it's about becoming portraits. So you see these three people collaborate, and then they bring out a blackout, a new image gets projected, and then people reorganize in the public space. Now, a couple of the really important things for me is a lot of politicians are talking about revitalizing their city centers and so on. Sadly, what politicians mean by that is to put like 19th century lampposts, cobblestones, Gap, and Starbucks. And what I believe that we need to do to revitalize our cities is, in fact, to create extremely eccentric interruptions like this that all of a sudden make you embody your city and amplify your presence onto an urban scale. A project like this is completely out of control. Nobody stops you from doing something or not doing it, and that's a really important thing. The tracking system, the surveillance apparatus, is projected in public space together with a description in English and Dutch, just so that if people are nerdy like I am, they can actually understand what the mechanism of predatory surveillance is. But the truth is that most of the time, people just don't really pay attention to the surveillance. They actually just establish these kinds of relationships of scale. And so these are like people that don't know each other, and they just... Or she abused her boyfriend for a couple of hours. And I mean, I'm showing you only 5 minutes of, like, I have 46 hours of tape of just what people came up with. It was really quite fun. Let's see, so this is her again. So as this project tours, we see very different kinds of behaviors emerge of, you know, how people represent themselves. It's also interesting because in a public space, you want to have sort of collective interaction. And the problem with a lot of projects in interactive art, like Vectorial Elevation, the Mexico project I just showed you, is that usually you have to take turns to participate. Whereas here, like, everybody has their own shadow, but then they're also creating a sort of common tableau. All right. This is the first project that I did in the United States. It's a project for Madison Square Park in New York City. The central oval was surrounded by 200 theatrical spotlights, and which were placed at ground level, illuminating the oval. And then what we did is we connected them to a sensor, not unlike what you might find at a gym, which actually, as you hold on to it, it measures electrical activity in your heart. And then as you hold on to it, gradually all of the 200 spotlights start flashing to your heartbeat. So right now you're sort of making the entire park beat to your vital signs. And then as you release the sensor, your recording goes to the very first spotlight, and all the previous participant recordings get pushed down one position down the queue. So as you're walking around the central oval of Madison Square Park, you're surrounded by the vital signs of the past 200 participants. And this is a project that was inspired by a really nice Mexican movie called Macario. It's a movie where the protagonist has a hunger-induced hallucination of of people, like basically he walks into this cave and everybody who's alive is represented by this little flickering candle. So it's a project that tries to visualize these kind of repetitive patterns that keep us alive, basically, and that are not so different from one to the other, to create this kind of larger tableau of interaction. And again, the purpose of this is to be passionately useless. It's not trying to sell you anything. I forbid any of my projects to have any corporate branding, which is why I don't work in the States very much. And the idea is that people will linger in the oval lawn, that they will spend time in the park, not necessarily just going home after work or whatnot. Finally, the last project I want to show you is the one I'm perhaps most proud of. It's a very difficult commission that I received from the University of Mexico City for the massacre of the students. If you remember, the Mexican government killed about 300 students in 1968, 10 days before the Olympics. And the university, who's now taken over the Tlatelolco Square where the massacre happened, commissioned me to remember this. So I'll just fast forward this part and I'll show you what we did for the memorial. So this is, well, this is the story about it. So most of the artists that I admire, people like Krzysztof Wojtyszko, Rachel Whiteread, or Hans Hakas, do their best work when trying to remember extremely difficult memories such as this. And how do you represent this tragedy? I mean, do you make some kind of phallic monument? Do you have the names of the murdered? We don't even know many of the names of who got killed. So the project of Voz Alta, which is my proposal is a megaphone. It's a megaphone that actually converts people's voices into powerful flashes of light.
Bueno, mi comentario es acerca de la represión que vivimos en este momento. Los mártires, todas aquellas personas que lucharon, que vieron por el futuro, pues muchas veces los dejamos en el olvido o solo recordamos la típica frase, el 2 de octubre no se olvida.
So as you would speak onto the megaphone, your voice would become light, would hit the old Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then would be beamed to the rest of the city through 3 other searchlights pointed in 3 directions. As you would drive in Mexico City, or as you looked out your window or you walked, you would see these flashing lights just all night rolling and rolling. And what we did is that you could actually tune into 96.1 FM, Radio UNAM, the university radio station, to listen live to what the lights were saying. So at any given time, there was an unmoderated, uncensored flow of people speaking onto the megaphone. I don't know if people in the back can read the subtitles, but basically this is one of the survivors of the massacre talking about her experience right at the plaza where this took place. We had extremely touching sort of participation in the project. We had a man who said, "My name is so-and-so, and I'm here to say that I'm the son of one of the soldiers who committed the massacre, and I'm here because I'm a new generation. I've lived with this guilt all my life." It was really, really quite amazing. We had a man who said, "My name is so-and-so, I'm a fireman, and I'm here to denounce that routinely the Mexican government asks us to put a dye, a coloring, in our water tanks so that when we spray protesters, they're easily identified. And I became a fireman because I wanted to protect people, not to be part of the apparatus of repression." I mean, it was just unbelievable, the kind of stuff that we got through this medium. Because as you know, in Mexico, even though there's been a lot of progress, media is still very much consolidated and monopolies that are very in collusion with a government that still to this date considers this a taboo. So the massacre of students has still, I mean, now people talk about it, and the guy who did it, Echeverria, is in house arrest. But, that thing that we do in Latin America where the guy's too old to go to jail, let's leave him with his 500 thread count cotton sheets at home. But anyway, at least people are talking about it, and the university certainly is doing a really, really incredible archive of it. But just one more thing to say about this project is that this is a radio program, basically, right? And it's made out of people just talking about their experiences. When no one was participating, which didn't happen very often, but when no one was participating, we would bring back recordings from 1968, from intellectuals, from poets, from activists, who would sort of talk about the experience of the protests of '68. And in that way, we would sort of activate this memory. Instead of keeping it as some kind of dead archive, we would mix the current concerns with this memory, with this history. So just to say that this project was up for 3 weeks. We are hoping to be able to make it for again, so that it's like a fixture of Tlatelolco Square. It was not all just ominous and dark and sad and tragic. It was also a lot of fun stuff. We had poets, we had rappers, we had, you know, again, marriage proposals. A lot of people like to propose matrimony through my pieces, which is great. And anyway, this is what I propose to sort of take over and remember some of these kinds of layers that make up who we are. So I think that's my time, and I'll stop it now. Yeah, I'll stop it now. All right, thank you very much.